G'day, I'm Patrick from Douglas Fir Design. Welcome to the Router Bits. I'm going to have a look today at these edge banding router bits. There's a male and a female bit, and what they basically allow you to do is securely attach a piece onto the edge of whatever stock that you're using. And the reason you might do this is if you're using veneer or ply or MDF and you want to put a solid timber edge on. So the first thing you're going to need to do is make sure that your edge band and your flat stock is the same thickness. This is 18mm ply, and so I've had to thickness this piece of Tassie oak down to 18mm because it was 19. We then have to use the router bits to cut the corresponding male and female parts in the stock and the edge band. We're going to cut the female component into the stock, the flat stock, and the male component into the edge band, and we'll start by setting up the piece for the flat stock now. The little tongue and groove, which is created by these bits, are 4mm thick, and I've measured that previously. So we need that to be centralised in our piece of stock. Because this is 18mm, we subtract that 4mm, which gives us 14mm, which means we need 7mm of material on each side of that little finger. In this case, it's going to be the female component or the groove. So now that we have our router bit set in the table, I want to make sure that the bottom of that little tongue is exactly 7mm from the throat plate, and I will be measuring that with my calipers. You can do it however you like. It doesn't matter if it's exactly centralised, it's just going to make it a lot easier to match it up with your corresponding male piece that you're going to cut into the edge band later on. Alright, so after measuring that carefully, I'm satisfied that that little tongue that we're going to cut, or the groove in the actual piece of stock, is centralised. Now we need to set the depth of the fence. Now that we've set the bit at the correct height, we need to set the fence. And the aim here is that when this piece cuts through cuts the groove that we're trying to create, I don't want it to be cutting any of the material on the top face or the bottom face. So we just need to make sure that the position that that top face is contacting the fence and the bit is pretty much exactly the same. So the bit is not cutting away any of that material. So what I'm going to do is just place my little square here, which has a nice sharp square edge, and push that forward until it is just missing the router bit when it's exposed at its most forward position. So I'll lock that off and just do some micro adjustments now. Turn the router bit back and forth to make sure that it isn't engaging in any way. And you want to get it as close as you can without touching. Alright, that's perfect, so I'll lock it off now. And we're ready to run our piece of flat stock over that router bit. Alright, so that is a very clean cut, and it didn't touch that top edge at all, but that 45-degree cut meets right at the edge, which is exactly what we want. So now we just need to set the corresponding bit to do our little hardwood edge band and make sure that the height matches this piece, and then we'll be ready to cut that one. So now we're ready to cut the hardwood edge band that we're going to create to cover this, and I'm going to use our flat stock with the female component as a guide to set the height of this next bit. So what I'm going to do is put this flat on the table and make sure that this groove here is lined up with this groove perfectly on this bit. And the best way that I can figure out how to do that is just visually. If you had some magical 4mm piece of something, you could shove it in there and line it up perfectly, but I'll do it visually, and if it is wrong, I'll be able to I'll do it on a test piece and do it again, but I'm pretty sure it'll be okay. After that, we're gonna have to set the depth, and to set the depth of this one, all we wanna do is line up the back of that groove there with the fence. It's as simple as that. So I'll just bring that forward to meet up with that. So I did my test cut and it worked out perfectly, so I don't need to adjust that. And so I'm going to run through a few more pieces. I've put some feather boards in place because you're working with small pieces, you don't want your fingers anywhere near the blade. And because the feather boards are so close, I'm going to push each piece through with a push stick from the end. Make sure you just don't get anywhere near that blade. It's also important when you're doing this to choose the best edge that you want exposed, because that's obviously going to be the front of your shelf or whatever it is. So if there is a poorer face, make sure that you're putting that towards the blade. So I've created a whole bunch of test pieces out of some flat stock, including solid timber and some plywood, and then a couple of pieces of the actual edge band, which I've got some jarrah here and some Tassie oak, and they all fit in perfectly. So the main reason that this type of edge band is used is if you're creating some shelves or a piece of cabinetry and you don't want to build solid timber shelving because it costs a fortune and it's very time consuming. You could use either a nice piece of veneer and match your edge band in the same timber as your veneer, or you could even do something like this with a plywood, which will just have probably a birch face, and then use a darker hardwood to use as a feature that sits on the front. It's a really strong join. There's a lot more glue surface area than just joining two pieces with one flat edge like that. And so it means that once you glue that in, that's going to be a strong edge. It's not going to fail, and it's going to look really nice, especially if you don't like the look of the ply or MDF or whatever piece of flat stock you're using. Another purpose that you could use for this, even if you were creating solid hardwood shelves, is to actually put a feature piece of timber on the front, and that might be something darker or more special or with a different grain. And I also really like the way that that join looks on the edge, so I would personally leave that exposed. If you wanted, you could do both edges and just cut your pieces at a 45 degree in a miter, and you'd be able to join those two edge bands on the front as well. But it's nice to know that it does leave a pretty cool decorative edge there if you wanted to use that as well. So this is dead easy to use. I was able to do it in one pass. If the timber you're using is very hard and very tough, or it's very knotty, you might want to do a couple passes to make sure that you're not pushing your router too hard and you're not going to tear out any of the timber. But I really like the effect of this. You can pick these Torquata edge banding bits up at Timbecon. You can grab them on their website, which is timbecon.com.au, or in either of their stores, and there's one in Perth and one in Melbourne.